So this is the Wingsung 3008, not to be confused with the Wingsung 3003 that I had on last week, and not to be confused with the very similar named Wingsung 6359 that I'm going to have on soon. My god, they have a wonderful naming system, don't they? So I just want to flat out come out and say that this is a pretty good pen. It's not all that often when I get a fountain pen from China that actually becomes one of my permanent everyday carry pens, one of about 5 or 6 pens that I'll always be using, and this has joined them up amongst pens such as the Parker Sonnet, Pilot Prera, pens such as that. Anyway, so this is a brand new pen that has only sprung up in the past year. It's made by Wingsung, which I was told is also part of the Hero brand, and of course it's a knockoff of a pen, and this time it is a knockoff of the TWSBI 580. Though instead of paying about $80 for the 580, this pen will only cost you about $4 to $5 on eBay. And as always, because you're buying a pen from China, you're always buying it with a little bit of risk. For example, this pen is the silver pen that I requested to buy, and as you can see, it's very silver. Obviously, it's been spending too much time in the sun recently. Anyway, let's just get into the specs of the pen, as always. So, capped, this pen is about 14 centimeters long, uncapped is 13.1 centimeters, posted, it boosts it to a pretty big 17.2 centimeters, and in terms of weight, it's about 13.5 centimeters uncapped and 24 grams posted. Now, in terms of ergonomics, I think this pen is pretty ergonomic. Obviously, it's been based on the TWSBI 580, so it should be ergonomic since it's borrowing a lot of the styling cues from that pen. You should be able to use this pen unposted. It's 13.1 centimeters, so most people should be able to use this pen unposted. The only issue that I have with this pen in terms of ergonomics is that there are some threads along here which you can rest your thumb on depending how you hold the pen. I tend to rest my thumb on it, though it only becomes an issue if I'm writing for a long period of time. Now, you can post this pen, well, only just, and once you do that, it makes it 17.1 centimeters, which is a pretty big pen. If I'm honest, I do like to write with pens posted, but this is a pretty heavy cap, and I just don't think that it feels particularly well balanced when you post this pen, so normally I don't bother posting this pen. Also, fun fact about this pen, the piston also can be operated while you have the cap on, which is a fun styling fact which the Chinese designer didn't design when they were ripping off this pen. Speaking of it being a piston filler, this pen has a pretty cool piston filler, which is really awesome considering that it only costs about $4. It holds about 2 mils of ink, and usually that ink will last at least a month. In terms of the mechanism feels pretty solid, though you will notice it being a little bit different to the TWSBI. It feels a little bit cheaper, though it still feels pretty good. Now, in terms of the body of the pen, I think it's built pretty well. I'm not sure what type of plastic it's made out of, but it is pretty solid. It resists most scratches, which is pretty good, and since I've been using this for about a month now, it hasn't really picked up many scratches at all. Like the TWSBI 580, the main body is not exactly a cylinder, but it's made up of 16 facets, which some people like, some people don't really like. I'm really impartial to it, I don't mind, but that's just something to consider. The only thing I'm a little bit disappointed about with this pen is if you put the cap on and you pull the clip, you can see the cap has quite a bit of flex to it on the threads, which isn't the biggest issue in the world, but I think I should just point it out. So let's take a look at the nib of this fountain pen, because usually it's the nib that really lets these Chinese fountain pens down, because usually the body is well constructed, though the nib is always scratchy and unreliable. Well, I can thankfully say that the nib really is where this pen excels, because this comes with a Lamy style, well, for some reason a Lamy style knockoff nib with a 0.38 extra fine, though you could get it with a 0.5 fine, but usually when you buy a 0.38 extra fine from a Chinese manufacturer, or even like a Japanese manufacturer such as Pilot, you're always going to be buying it with a little bit of risk because extra fine nibs can be incredibly scratchy. However, this one is absolutely nothing like my other extra fine nibs. It is buttery smooth, and I don't know how they did that when it also manages to put down such a fine line. Now, it's not as fine as a, say, a Pilot extra fine. I'll show you in the writing sample, but it is incredibly fine, yet it manages to be incredibly smooth. So, bravo to Wingsung for that. In terms of reliability, this pen is an incredibly reliable pen. This pen pretty much never hard starts on me, even if I haven't been using it for a day or so. And that is really good considering that's where most Chinese fountain pens really have issues, so this pen is incredibly reliable. Now, in terms of flex, you're not going to get much flex from this nib. This is a Lamy style nib, and pretty much with every Lamy style nib, you're going to get minimal flex with this nib. That doesn't mean it's a stiff nib, but it means that when you try and flex this nib, all that's going to happen is the nib's just going to spring upwards and the tines don't spread apart. So all you're going to get is a little bit more ink flow. Now, in terms of ink flow, you're going to get a pen that's moderately wet. It's not uber wet, but the fact that you're using an extra fine nib really does limit how much ink flow that you can really get. But for an extra fine nib, it is pretty wet, and I must say, when you're writing for long periods of time, it's able to keep up with fast writing, which is pretty good. Alright, welcome to the writing sample for the Wingsung 3008. This is a 0.38mm extra fine nib. And the ink that I'm using is trusty old Parker Quink, so I'm pretty sure I had this ink left over when I was doing exams. In fact, yeah, exam notes. Anyway, the paper is Clairefontaine, so let's get into a writing sample. Ah, isn't that just a wonderful quote? Do you want to know who said that? I said that to the guy who was shipping me my pen on eBay. Can you send me the 3008 with silver? Silver. And, yeah. Oh, yeah, and a 0.5mm fine nib. Anyway, he did a great job at that. Cracking. Anyway, so in the writing sample, it was a pretty fine nib. It was really nice to use. There isn't much feedback from this nib. In terms of fast writing, as you can see, it kept up pretty well with that. In terms of lines, this is it with no pressure whatsoever, and I'll slowly add pressure, and this is pretty much as far as it will let me go. So no pressure and the full amount of pressure that I'll go. You're not going to get much line variation at all. The only difference really being this section down here with a little bit more pressure is a little bit darker, considering that there is a little bit more ink being put down. That probably would explain it. Now, in terms of wetness, as I said, moderately wet feed, though it is an extra fine nib, so it does limit how much ink can be deposited, though as you can see, that's pretty wet for an extra fine nib. In terms of reverse writing, you can do it, but I don't know why you would. I'm not the biggest fan of reverse writing, so yes, you can do it, though it's not exactly thinner than what you get on the other side, so I don't know why you'd use it on this pen. Now, in terms of it being compared to with a Pilot Extra Fine, this is Wingsung. And this is a Pilot Extra Fine. Let me get some ink. Some Noodler's Black. I had to steal the converter from this to shove in my Pilot 78G. This is a Pilot Extra Fine. As you can see, it is a much finer hairline here and much thicker there. And if you compare it with a Pilot Fine on the 78G, as you can see, it's very comparable. The Pilot is about the same amount of scratchiness to it, though this pen costs about 4 times as much. So thank you for watching this review of the Wingsung 3008.